Alright there, guys. We're going to use these videos to help stretch my talents as a teacher and to help reinforce the learning that you're doing in Mr. Riggs' room, either in algebra or pre-algebra. This skill for today comes from 4-1 of the pre-al book that is found on page 136 and 140, talking about powers and exponents. But I think it's a good skill for even algebra students to go back over and cement their learning even more. In 4-1 powers and exponents, we have to understand what makes up an exponent. And two things make up an exponent. One is called a base. The other is called the exponent or power. These two things is basically what make an exponent, a base and a power. I can write this one of two ways. If I have 5 to the third or 5 cubed, that means the power is to the third. That's the same as saying 5 times 5 times 5. And then 5 times 5 times 5 is not 15, it's all multiplication. It's not 5 times 3. It's 5 times 5 times 5. So I know what 5 times 5 is. 5 times 5 is 25. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 25 and multiply it by another 5 to find that 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. So 5 to the third, or 5 cubed, is the same as 5 times 5 times 5, which is equal to 125. This is something that is kind of hit and miss on our probes. Right here, sometimes I see the 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15, or 5 times 5 is 25, and we forget the third 5, but 5 to the third is saying 5 times 5 times 5, and if you have a calculator, you can either punch it in as 5 to the third, or write it in what we call, this would be expanded form. And this is exponential form. And abbreviate that. This would be called standard form. Anything that's just a straight up number we'd call standard form. So then once we understand this, we can plug numbers in and solve. Remember, this uses substitution, rule of substitutions. Variables for numbers, so W is going to be 5. First thing I do is rewrite that problem. -3 plus x, or excuse me, 2 to the third power. Alright, now, first things first, this uses distribution property, so that means I have to take this 5 and distribute it to both terms. I'm going to start with 5 and -3. This makes -15 plus 5 times 2. Now I'm only going to do the base. 5 times 2 would be 10, and I'm going to keep the exponent. The 5 does not get distributed to the exponent or to the power. It only gets distributed to the base. So now I have -15 plus 10 to the third. Now, following order of operations, I know that I need to handle this exponent. Now, in order of exponents, please excuse the E has to do with exponents. So now I have to solve for 10 to the third, which is the same as 10 times 10 times 10. Well, I know 10 times 10 is 100, and I'm pretty good with my powers of 10, so 100 times 10 is going to be equal to 1,000. So now I come back through and I rewrite the problem as -15 plus 1,000. I can even use the calculator for that. So let's go negative with 15 negative plus 1,000. I'm going to get a positive 985. This is a work. This is your communication for this type of problem. I really want to stress this trimester the use of communicating in math. If you don't communicate correctly in math, then it's like starting in the middle of a sentence in your language arts class. And Mrs. Seitz, Mrs. Gingrey wouldn't accept that. So we don't just communicate with the final answer. We communicate throughout the whole problem. And the whole problem starts here, moves to the substitution, shows distribution, shows the use of exponents, and then shows adding negative numbers and a final answer. When I see work like this, I can easily see what you did. Even if you're wrong, even if you miss a period in language arts, I can still see the sentence and I can still see the error. I can't see an error when you just pick up in the middle of a sentence. Okay? So, remember, this is nothing brand new learning for you, but powers and exponents, you have a base, you have an exponent. I can combine bases as long as the bases are the same. I can combine them. So 5, 5, and 5 are all the same bases. If I was written a problem like 5 times 5 times 2 times 3 times 2, I'd have to write this problem a little bit differently. I'd have to group per basis. So I have 2 5s, so that means 5 to the second, times I have 2 2s, so 2 to the second, and then that 3 has no power, so times 3. So I can group them, and while this would be expanded form, I can put that into expanded or exponential form. I could also solve it and put it into standard form. That's the lesson for today, and that's the quick review